Marketing is a podcast for business owners and leaders, produced by my dad, Steve Davis, and his colleague at Talked About Marketing, David Ariely, in which they explore marketing through the lens of their own 4 Ps: person, principles, problems, and perspicacity. Yes, you heard that correctly. Apart from their love of words, they really love helping people. So they hope this podcast will become a trusted companion on your journey in business.
Do you know what I love about you, David Ariely?
Lots of things, I hope.
Every time we meet, you are someone who brings something from left field onto the plate.
Hopefully it's chocolate or steak.
So you're sort of predictably rational.
Yeah, I guess to a degree, in that I try to accept that my brain is predominantly emotional, but then in order to function well with other people, it helps to try and be consistent, which means a bit of an application of rationality is helpful.
But we both know, at the end of the day, you and I and our listener, we're all predictably irrational, and we'll be arguing that case with evidence this episode.
Our 4 Ps. Number 1, person. The aim of life is self-development, to realise one's nature perfectly. That is what each of us is here for. Oscar Wilde.
In the person segment this time, I wanted to share a small snippet from a recent episode of the Adelaide Show podcast, because I had a chance to sit with Jordan from the Adelaide Economic Development Agency about the state of the economy in South Australia. Of course, it's got a focus on Adelaide and that centre part, the engine room of our state's economy, because it occurred to me that from a person perspective, we're all out here chugging away, doing the bits we can for our clients and for ourselves, and we're noticing prices for things going up. I don't think anyone's really immune from the cost of living pressure. And there might be some people thinking, I'm not sure if this is just me. Is everyone else doing it easier? Or am I the odd one out? So I wanted to play this little snippet in which Jordan defined the winners and losers, if you like, of the current state of play, to see if it helps us put things in perspective. Let's have a quick listen, and then David, you and I will reflect on this.
We saw nighttime spending fall in nominal terms below 2022 levels from September last year. So those rate rises, they came, and then that what was called the fixed rate mortgage cliff hit too. So everyone came off those 2%
Yes.
COVID fix. All kind of really hit boom like August. And then we saw just that spending in bars and clubs in the nighttime drop away. At the same time, the footy season finished too. And I think when we talk about the nighttime economy, you can't go past how important footy is to drive people to Adelaide Oval and drive people out into bars.
Get those tribes going. Yep.
So, yeah, people are making that decision, but you just got to remember, and this is what I've told marketing a lot, is segments. There are still segments, for example, the elderly people let's generalise, that live in North Adelaide, have a lot of money in the bank, paid off their mortgage. They were happy to go out to Fugazi and spend $200, $300. You also have the cohort of young people still living at home. I don't know if you have any of the, I don't know how old your kids are, but young people finished uni, full-time job, living at home, not paying any rent. And this is why people are confused, because it's the people who are hurting are your families with a mortgage and 1.5 kids. They are hurting. Your elderly people with mortgage paid off and your young people with a job that are living at home with no expenses, they're doing okay. If they're the ones that are going out and spending in dining and still going out to nightclubs and music festivals. So that's why people are confused, because those people or those segments are still going out spending. That big portion of families and young people, even without kids with a mortgage, who've just inherited a mortgage, who are struggling. Because you've got to think about the size of mortgage too. The older you are, the smaller your mortgage. So the less interest rates impact you. Whereas those younger people that have just come in, they're impacted more. So it's like this scale when you talk about the segments too.
So there's what I'll call the economic donut, David. You've got one end of the economy with older people who have got in early, bought and probably paid off their family home, and they've got cash in the bank, and they're still able to go out and splash a bit of cash around without worrying about things too much. And at the other end, we've got the people you used to teach. So these are young sort of 20-somethings who might have a job. They're living at home, so they've got an income, but they've got basically no expenses, and they're going out and flashing the cash around. It's the people in the middle, those who are starting their journey of home ownership, those who are raising families, who are really feeling the pinch at the moment. Does that resonate with your observations of the world, David?
Yeah, it's pretty much how it works. But I think I'd put one caveat into older people, and that is, in the main, they spend less because they're not paying off the house. They're not necessarily putting kids through education anymore. You know, if they're going to use lots of healthcare, in the main, they've got health insurance. They're the generation who does. So really, we're seeing a contraction in consumer spending generally because older people slow how much they spend. Everyone in the middle is being so careful. And the young who can spend will only be in that bubble of spending for a very short period of time before they get the job where they move out of home, move away, get married, and join the middle group who are having to be very careful of how much money they spend.
It's interesting because just recently, at the time of recording, we had the Adelaide Cup. And I did notice, as I had a look at their website, that there was basically no mention of horse racing. There was a scant mention of a betting circle, if you want to put a bet on, but the overwhelming majority was written in that sort of juvenile, young adult wording about dancing and moving to some tunes and sipping some drinks and cocktails. And it was all, it occurs to me, in the wake of Jordan's talk, focused on that part of the donut. The young people who are desperately wanting to stake their status with their group and they want to be seen to let their hair down. Who cares about anything, let alone horses, but who cares about anything? Let's just party and live like it's 1999, to quote Prince.
It's very much Prince and Princess Day, or Princess and Prince Day, in the big marquee with cool beverages and air conditioning. And whatever happens outside of there, I wonder if there was any horse racing. Based on the temperature of the day the Adelaide Cup happened, I wouldn't have wanted to be outside on a horse.
No, that's right. But there is just an example of how Jordan's overlaying on the economic situation makes sense as you see those things flourish, because there will be other people sitting at home going, well, geez, I wouldn't have minded going to that, but I just can't afford it. And so that's where we're at the moment. Who knows? These things very rarely stay the same forever. It goes through cycles. But I just wanted to use this first part of this episode as holding up a bit of a mirror to our economy, so to give people perspective.
Well, there's one thing that we really can add to it, and that is that, of course, there will be a cash transfer from, baby boomers who are now majority in Australia are retired. And that cash transfer is happening to some degree in the bank of mum and dad or the bank of grandma and grandpa, which is going to enable a certain amount of those young people to get into the property market, but with family support, which will put them in a very different position. So what we're seeing is that if you get the generational cash transfer sooner, you will probably maintain more spending power because of the economic security that comes from that generational transfer.
And also worth noting, a reflection on your own business and the products or services you sell. Who in that donut do you target? I think that's also another thing that this conversation brings to light.
are 4 P's. Number 2, principles. You can never be overdressed or overeducated. Oscar Wilde.
Well, David, Predictably Irrational. This book that you recommended by Dan Ariely was an absolute godsend. I loved reading it. He just worked methodically through the way us humans interact with other humans and the institutions around us. Being a behavioural economist, it just helped me see things. It's like having those UV lights. You walk into a room, you see things as you think they are, then you dim the lights, turn on the blue light, and suddenly you see stuff that was there all the while that wasn't available at first glance. This book, why did you recommend it?
Simply because Dan Ariely is such an infectious contrarian. Like, he is such fun that you don't mind that the Enlightenment world of reason is being demolished before your eyes, and that by the end of it, there are almost no stones from the Enlightenment edifice left on top of each other. By the end of his book, you're at the point of going, okay, we're highly predictable, we're predominantly emotional. You can work out what most people are going to do next, but it's not the rational thing, but it's emotionally consistent. And I first read it, I think, in about 2013, and suggested it to lots of students when I started teaching complex problem solving, and everyone loved it because they realized, this is the voice in my own head I'm battling with when I'm trying to be reasonable. This is what I'm getting exasperated about when I try and get a family member or a friend to do the rational thing, and they just don't want to or don't get even what you're talking about. It's just such a good book for realizing why fighting the fight for a bit more reason sometimes is such a case of pushing a very big rock uphill.
Now, there's a number of things that are directly related to us in business. In fact, they probably all are, but many overlap with our own businesses and lives. I want to just pick off 3 in particular that spring to mind. The thing about norms, about the cost of leaving doors open, and also anchoring. I'll just headline the anchoring one. That's the one that your business needs to embrace, but the others as well. Social norms and market norms. I love this particular section of the book because it marries with my experience. It put words to my experience. I used to be a mobile DJ, David. I don't know if that shocks you or not.
No, I also remember that you used to be the DJ at the Ice Arena.
Indeed.
Like, you knew how to chill before people knew that was a thing.
That's right. Hit that ice. These days, of course, I wouldn't be saying that. I remember a good friend of mine getting married, and I said, look, I will give you mate rates for my mobile DJ work. I gave him about half price or something, which I thought was the right thing to do. I hated the whole night because I still had to slave my guts out with the same lugging of equipment, the same dealing with people pestering with different song requests that no one else will like, etc., schlepping it all back afterwards and feeling horrible that I was feeling like this because I was trying to help out a friend. And it occurred to me as I drove home that night, if I had just said, I'll do this for free, I would have had a very different approach and experience. And lo and behold, that's exactly what the research tells us, because there are 2 different norms with which we operate as humans. There's the social norms in which we're doing things socially, a friend helping a friend, and market norms where we switch gears to economic exchange of value, typically money, and it just changes the whole chemistry. Pretty powerful stuff, especially when businesses try to make the noises of saying, hey, we're your best friends. And then they say, hey, we're going to charge you these extra fees, and yeah, you're a day late with that, so good night. Well, there's the social norm, any social hope, ripped up in about 2 seconds flat.
Yeah, we can really look at all the big telecommunications companies in Australia and most of our large power/energy providers and go, they haven't understood there are these two norms, and they keep trying to conflate them. They keep trying to behave like a kind person when in reality playing a brutal economic game, and really all we do, all of us, is resent it and dislike it more and more because we know they're conflating two things that shouldn't go together.
And there's a great example that he uses of a Thanksgiving dinner. Let's have a quick listen to that.
You are at your mother-in-law's house for Thanksgiving dinner, and what a sumptuous spread she has put on the table for you. The turkey is roasted to a golden brown, the stuffing is homemade and exactly the way you like it, your kids are delighted, the sweet potatoes are crowned with marshmallows, and your wife is flattered. Her favourite recipe for pumpkin pie has been chosen for dessert. The festivities continue into the late afternoon. You loosen your belt and sip a glass of wine. Gazing fondly across the table at your mother-in-law, you rise to your feet and pull out your wallet. "Mum, for all the love you put into this, how much do I owe you?" you say sincerely. As silence descends on the gathering, you wave a handful of bills. Do you think $300 will do it? No, wait, I should give you 400. This is not a picture that Norman Rockwell would have painted. A glass of wine falls over. Your mother-in-law stands up, red-faced. Your sister-in-law shoots you an angry look, and your niece bursts into tears. Next year's Thanksgiving celebration, it seems, may be a frozen dinner in front of the television set. What's going on here? Why does an offer for direct payment put such a damper on the party? As Margaret Clark, Judson Mills, and Alan Fiske suggested a long time ago, the answer is that we live simultaneously in two different worlds, one where social norms prevail, and the other where market norms make the rules.
Wow, I remember as he's told that story the first time I heard it, standing up to offer the mother-in-law money for the Thanksgiving dinner. Instinctively I knew it would switch it to a market norm and it would just poison any of the goodwill in a moment.
Yep. Yeah. He's brilliant at finding things that just hit viscerally, hit at such a deep emotional level, and it's ultimately the way he proves his point.
And so I think mindfully, what do you think of this, David? I do often refer to many of our clients as friends and clients, and I engage with them for paid work, but then we'll do some social things as well. I think the reason I've escaped this being a negative thing at this point is there is a clarity that this is social time and this is market time, and I've just by luck seemed to have hit the knack of doing it that way. But I take Dan's point, it's to be treaded carefully. I
think part of what you're doing there is defining what's going on very clearly, like it's either work or it's social. But in real terms, which we'll get to later, it's kind of Charles Duhigg's point of it's either a practical conversation or an emotional conversation, and they aren't the same thing, and you know what conversation you're in, and the other person knows what conversation you're in. So yeah, a distinction can be drawn. As long as you are doing good work and getting paid appropriately for the work bit, but the social bit is social and then work gets left out of that conversation, people can change gear effectively. They just don't like it when the two things are combined.
Yeah, good point. And that little reference to Charles Duhigg, that is a little promo for episode 4. Make sure you listen to that when it comes out. That could change all your relationships. The second part of this book by Dan Ariely that I wanted to touch base on was the cost of closing doors. He says that us humans, the way we've been wired, if we've got a different door open for a different thing, hey, we want to do this, we want to do that, we don't want to say we'll never do this again, just in case it might be helpful down the track. Every one of those doors that we keep open is actually draining attention and energy from us and diminishing how much we can put into the open doors. As I say it like this, it's common sense. But I, as a result of this book, David, this book have made the decision that I am no longer going to be doing theatre reviewing, which is a door I've held open for 30 years, voluntarily, reviewing theatre earnestly. Thankfully, I've built a lovely reputation and I get sought out to come and review shows, and it's lovely. But at the back of my mind, this book made me realise I'm doing it, yes, because I love it, but secondly, because you just never know if it will open another door. And so my decision is, until both my daughters have left high school, no more theatre reviewing. And it's felt scary, but also refreshing and a grown-up step to take to close a door. Is that as you would anticipate the experience to be?
In a sense, as you were talking about that, I've found it really interesting since I left academia that I made a very deliberate choice at the end of teaching that I wasn't going to go back and teach. That doing the masters, I managed to maintain that, and since uni finished, nothing has made me think about even teaching part-time or just jumping in doing a guest lecture here and then. I very much made the deliberate choice, and probably without realizing it was from Ariely until we reread the book for this series, that it was from Ariely that I really realized the same thing as you. Some things you leave it open just in case it has a positive impact one day, but then realize it just chews up time and energy. And time and energy that you could put into something now that bears immediate positive fruit now for both relationships and for work and for well-being. And that, it's really good when you can just say, look, that's a good thing, but at the moment, it's not that I don't have the key to the door. It's not that I can't go back and reopen it, but I'm not leaving it open and I'm not wasting 3 hours a week to go over and visit that door anymore.
Yeah, you did right. And something else, another hat tip to the Charles Duhigg reference next week is I bumped into a very well-known journalist here in Adelaide. She's doing some part-time work now, which surprised me. And she made some similar comments about closing a door off to some of the stuff she'd been doing. And that conversation came up because of the art of conversation that we cover with Charles next week. So that's closing doors. He's got, Dan Ariely has some wonderful examples and some research studies that illuminate that. But the main course, the one that you think is really the reason for reading this book, will explain that if I had a lake at my home with large ground and you, David, were recently hatched as a little gosling, and if I was the first thing you saw, can you explain why you would just love me and follow me for the rest of my life?
It's because brains have a habit and a tendency to anchor on the first thing they experience and to relativistically compare that first thing to everything else that comes after. And that getting your head around anchoring is critically important in business, because the first number you put out there that clients pick up on, or prospective clients pick up on, the first statement about your product you put out there that they pick up on, is the one that they will compare everything to after that point. And that can either be really beneficial if you've made sure that anchor is good, or really terrible if that anchor is an impossible act to follow.
And so that's why as petrol prices go up, we feel it, because we've been used to paying X amount of dollars per litre for so long, and suddenly there's a jump until we get used to that after a long while, and then it's okay. But it's a really big step to take to shift from that first impression. It's based on that whole thing about the first impressions, but this anchoring, and I love some of the examples he uses. One of them is quite intriguing, of the Economist newspaper / magazine having a special advertised where they'd say, right, you can pay, I think it was a figure like $59 or $69 a year to get the online version of The Economist, or you can pay $125 a year to get the print publication delivered, or also $125, you can get the print version and the online version. And when Dan tested his students as to what they would buy, the majority, 80-odd+% of them said, well, obviously, the one that gives you the print and the online, because the online's basically free. But when we took away the middle one, which he called the decoy price, the hollow little price, And we only had online for that low amount, or the print version with online as well. Most of them went for the online. And it's because this thing about anchoring, he argues eloquently that, yes, we try and compare things to work out if something is good value, and either A, we don't know what a good value is, so that's the power of the first price we hear being the one that sets the scene. And secondly, when we do come to do comparisons, we compare the easiest things there are to compare, whether or not they're the most important ones.
Yeah, we want to compare an apple with an apple, even if we've got an apple and an orange. And from my experience of teaching people this for over a decade and getting people to use it, the biggest thing I've learnt about anchoring is, where possible, let clients know what the most expensive, complete, over-delivered product is worth first. Give them the dearest thing they actually don't need first, and then work backwards towards the one that actually fits them best.
Yeah, and that's also covered by the power of persuasion and those books. There's a whole lot of research that points this way. Dan's just got a really good way of making these insights land.
Our 4 Ps. Number 3, problems. I asked the question for the best reason possible. Simple curiosity. Oscar Wilde.
In the problem segment, David, I have a confession to make.
It's a good thing I'm in another room and there's nothing that can be thrown at me.
I've used your name in vain.
Was there a headband?
This has come about because I had a client call me today at the time of recording, and I said, you won't believe this. We're about to talk about this. She said, look, I want to get on podcasts as a guest. Can you give me some advice? How do I go about that? And I said, well, first of all, there is no great trick. You just need to do a bit of research, and it doesn't have to be long, in Spotify, on Google, in your favorite podcast app, for podcasts on the theme or topic that you have expertise in. See which ones float to the top, and then listen to a few episodes so you get a sense of whether or not you're going to be a good fit, whether they have guests, etc., and then reach out and ask with a suggestion of how you might add to what they're offering. I said, don't go with an agency that promises to get you on podcasts. And here's why, David. I've had 2 of recent time. One, where I used my own name in vain, came from young Isaac, who said, I represent a PR agency and I'm reaching out to you about the Adelaide Show because we are regularly in need of podcast placements for our clients on different podcast channels. So already he's talking in very industrial terms, not giving a shit about any of the human qualities of podcasting. It's purely that market norm. Hey, we just need to chuck them on your show, basically. He actually, this is a quote, most of these placements are generic interviews or business-related talks. This guy has no passion for what he's selling. If he was selling me...
Or for his client, which is as bad or worse.
Exactly. He's treating me like a rolled-up plastic tube of Fritz when I know that I'm at least a sirloin steak. He said, we want to build a long-term partnership and it would be awesome if we could work together on a mutually beneficial partnership. And I'd really appreciate it if you can provide me with the listener stats of the podcast as well. Let me know if you're up for this. Well, I replied, as I do with all these people, I'd love to know your 3 favourite episodes and what it was that captured your interest to reach out. Very curious. He came back. Now, hats off to his honesty. Hi, not even using my name. Hi, I hope you are well. So I have personally not listened to any of the episodes. I'm just reaching out to you for a PR agency I represent, so if you're interested in interviews, please do let me know. Goodbye, Isaac.
I personally think Isaac is a current very, very bad version of an AI agent. Because any human that can be that crass and ineffective at connecting with other creatives, wow, what a breathtaking place to be in your early career.
Yes. Here's the other one where I used your name. it came in, hey, talking about marketing team. Again, if they'd actually listened, our names are not that hard to grab. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for the quality of content on talking about marketing. Second, I have a great recommendation for a guest on your podcast, and that would be the lovely blah, blah, blah. Besides being the founder and CEO of a woman-only company specializing in digital marketing, she's also the head of something else, a successful Y Combinator startup with over $50 million raised. She's the CEO and founder of an agency, an influencer and affiliate marketing agency. Since 2018, they've launched 40-plus affiliate programs, onboarded 8,000 affiliates, and generated over 12 million revenue. She's a speaker and consultant on growing businesses. You can find a bunch of her gigs here and more about the agency here. If you also believe having her on the show will produce valuable content for your listeners, let me know. I look forward to hearing from you. Well, I replied saying, David, dear Jerica, David is insanely curious to know which episode or guest planted the idea for this outreach. I got a reply. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Hi, Stephen. I hope all is well. We were interested in the podcast episode Context is King, which at the time of writing and recording was the single most recent episode that would have taken half a second to find. That's it. And then she goes on about how this person could record an episode talking about one of these topics, blah, 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 blah. And I replied, hi, Jerica, thanks for letting us know. As you would have heard, we do not have guests on our podcast, but we're glad you found the episode useful. What do you do, David? There is...
You hope the AI agents stop hallucinating and that the people start using their brains.
Never use agencies. This is absolutely shocking and soulless, and it just makes you think those podcasts, they do trick into this. It's just going to be a tsunami of plastic-generated, self-interested content and nothing that's truly trying to help or deeply entertain and move the listener.
Our 4 Ps. Number 4. Perspicacity. The one duty we owe to history is to rewrite it. Oscar Wilde.
All right, that got heavy. So for perspicacity, David, I want to find some salve for the soul with Dave Allen, who was a great Irish comedian, very popular in the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s.
He must have drunk a lot of whiskey by the 90s.
He must have. Did you ever encounter much of his stuff on the first time round?
I remember sort of as a little kid trying to keep up, going, I wish I was about 5 years older, because I think my first exposure to Dave Allen would have been when I was about 8. Right. And I get the impression that may not have been a good idea, but I really enjoyed it.
It might have fried you psychologically, which probably does explain a lot.
It probably explains a lot. That and going to Apocalypse Now when I was 9.
Yes. Yeah, way too early. So perspicacity, we think about thinking. All right, so here's the thing. I happen to have in my feed a video clip of Dave Allen telling a joke about trying to teach a young kid how to tell the time on a watch. Let's have a listen to a snippet.
So one of the most important things we as parents do is we teach our children about time. We teach them important things like reading the clock. I'm going to teach you to read the clock. I'm going to teach you to read the time. Why? Because it's important that you know the time. Why? Because how would you know when to get up to go to school? Mummy would make me. What if Mummy wasn't there? You'd wake me. What if we both weren't there? Wouldn't go to school. How would you know when breakfast was? I'd be hungry. Shut up! Somebody came along to you and said, what time is it? And you didn't know, you'd feel stupid. Well, why doesn't he feel stupid? He doesn't know. Let me go through this whole thing. I'm going to teach you. I did it myself with my son. I'm going to teach you how to read the clock. This is a clock. It's not actually a clock. It is a clock, but it's not a clock. It's a watch. It's called a watch. Time is made up of zones, periods of time, all right? I know I said there are 24 hours in a day. 12 in the day, 12 in the night. But a day is made up of a day and a night. What are you, stupid? I couldn't very well say Monday night. Everybody knows when I say Monday, I'm talking about the 24 hours. Now shut up and listen. Now, on every clock or watch, there are 3 pointers. They're called hands, all right? They point to the hour, all right? You understand that? There's the hour hand. That's the first hand, the hour hand. The second hand is the minute hand, and the third hand is the second hand. Shut up!
That's pretty representative of his shtick. I mean, a lot of his stuff was poking fun religiously, but this one was taking something obvious and banal and then looking at it with the fresh innocence of a kid. That bit, David, I think is timeless. I think that will always be good shtick for comedy.
Yep. Dave Allen, when he was brilliant, and that bit will stay brilliant.
The thing that's interesting to me that made me go, I need to talk to David about this, is as he's looking down at this imaginary kid he's talking to, and the kid asks an obvious question about why the third hand, who's called the second hand, and he swooshes his hand through the air as if he just gives the kid a hit on the head, which everyone laughs at. I didn't. I actually thought, you know what? Like a snake cracking its skin, I think I've just grown up past that being something that is entertaining. I actually don't like that behaviour. I think the world's moved on, although you don't think it has moved on, have you?
Well, I think, polite public world has moved on. But, my comment, listeners, to Steve earlier was, I've got former students who work in child protection. So I know there's a lot of kids who still get whacked on the back of the head, but it's not publicly acceptable. It's not meant to be how we want the future to be. So we're in a strange situation that we're projecting how we want it to be far more, and whether that is a smokescreen for a genuine influence on making the world better, I hope it's making it better. But someone like Dave Allen, you can go from comfortable to uncomfortable very quickly. People like Benny Hill or Kenny Everett, the sort of sexual humour, the diminishing of women, again, I'm glad the clips don't pop up in my feed regularly anymore.
What I'm finding is it's patchy. Some bits great and some bits you go, oh no, we've moved on from there. But there's another issue aside from this, and that is the actual content. First of all, would a child today understand what an analogue clock face is? There
was an amazing list, when I was an academic from a lecturer at Harvard that came out every year saying what first years at university won't know. Like they won't know that there was ever a point where there was a cable running from the TV to your chair in a little box, and you could turn a knob to make the volume go up and down and turn a knob to make the channels switch.
That's right. The first remote controls were wired.
Wired. And I remember my grandparents having one, and at the time thinking, wow, it must be awful to be that old that you can't just get up and go turn the channel.
The other thing is the actual content, the allusions that I love referring to from Shakespeare, biblical ones that I grew up with. In fact, this came up in conversation with my daughter the other night. There was a bit of a spat between two people in a relationship in her world of pop stars, and at lunch everyone was piling on one of them. I said, look, probably from what we can see, he was acting badly, but remember, these two humans were involved in a relationship. We don't know the whole story. And so there was once someone captured in the book, Jesus Christ, who was captured saying, or referred back to as saying, in a situation like this when the noble people at the time wanted to throw stones at a woman because she was involved in adultery, He said, well, of course you can. The one here that's never sinned before, you go ahead, you throw the first stone. And she went, wow, that's really fascinating. I said, yeah, there's a saying, he who without sin cast the first stone. I thought to myself, even though we're not a religious family and the girls haven't been brought up this way, I felt sad that little illusion, which I have found useful at different times in life, these sorts of things are gone. And
even ones from Shakespeare, like, I want my pound of flesh from The Merchant of Venice. I remember saying that 3 or 4 months ago somewhere, and no one understood what I just said. They go, what do you mean? So for us, as we think about things from a perspicacious perspective, how do we think about thinking, moving forward, what do we do here? I think we just need to be mindful that it comes back to the basics, doesn't it? Will our audience get this? Because there are plenty of memes on Facebook saying, hey, if you know what this is, then you know you're old. That's done comedically, but in fact, it's a shibboleth, if I can use yet another biblical term that I find handy, that your crowd will either be the in crowd or the out crowd based on that. And depending who you're trying to reach, you're not going to get far getting this younger crowd if you're referring to things that the cultural microscope, the cultural spotlight, has not had within it, which is made harder because of the splintered everywhereness of different media, that you could live a whole life in the same house with someone with a TV in your own room and probably never watch the same show. And really this, if we want to, ground this for, the takeaway lesson for small business, it's work hard on your buyer personas. Never stop working hard on your buyer personas. If you don't know who the person is who's going to buy your product, then there may not be a person who will buy your product, because you need to be targeting them directly, because you have to get a message into their splintered world, because they don't necessarily look outside of their splintered world. And a good question to include in that as we build the personas, not just things they like, things they're worried about, what sort of cultural references would be appropriate for them? That would really... What are their social and cultural norms? Yeah. Which, again, is very difficult to answer. It requires real research, but then that's kind of the advantage of doing it properly, is actually, well, the more you learn, the more you can actually talk to people authentically, and the more positively they will respond if whatever you're offering is relevant to them. And even if you haven't listed them, you can, if you've got an idea to use something like that pound of flesh, you could glance at your persona and say, would they get this or not? At least you're a step closer to making a good decision. Particularly good if you want to market something to a butcher. On that note, the third hand is on the second hand, and the first hand is moving as well, so we better wind this one up. Do you still wind up watches? Yes, you can. You can buy lovely Swiss ones.
Thank you for listening to Talking About Marketing. If you enjoyed it, please leave a rating or a review in your favourite podcast app. And if you found it helpful, please share it with others. Steve and David always welcome your comments and questions, so send them to podcast@talkedaboutmarketing.com. And finally, the last word to Oscar Wilde. There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.